Kia ora te whānau, ko tai mai nei, ki te tautaku e tēnei kaupapa, e kore, e mutu, aku mihi, tēnei atua. Welcome to everybody who's joined us today and to our wonderful panelists. This is the fifth in the Progressive Thinking series run by the PSA. My name is Sarah Austen-Smith. I'm stepping in for Andrea From, our wonderful PSA MC who is on leave this week. So I am a new face, and today we're going to be talking to Janie Walker about her chapter titled Being a Fisherwoman or a Gardener, How COVID-19 Turned Community on its Head. So welcome, Janie, and welcome to our panelists. I'm going to do a round of introductions shortly. But before I do that, I'll cover off the usual housekeeping. We have a number of attendees still arriving, so welcome. We have kicked off promptly so we can get through as much today as possible, including your questions. We have James Lord here on screen as well, it looks like. Welcome, James.
Hi, James.
Colleague at B Collective. So today, guys, as usual, if you can submit your questions for the panel to individuals, if you've got somebody that you specifically want to hear from, using the Q&A function rather than the chat function if possible. That just helps us collate everything at the end. And we really hope to allow some time for your own reflections on the COVID lockdown and the COVID environment. If we don't get through everything, as always, Janie has said that she is happy to answer questions after the fact, and our panelists will work to come back to you if we don't get to what you would like to contribute. So without further ado, I guess do keep those questions short is the other thing. We all like to get our point across, but hopefully we can get through more questions if we keep them succinct. So Janie Walker, I will introduce you, a key contributor today. Janie is from B Collective, a social enterprise that works alongside community to support people into volunteering. Janie has a strong union and feminist background and a master's in community climate change adaptation in Fiji. So welcome, Janie.
Thank you.
We also have Leora Hirsh, who heads up DIA's Strategic Community Programs and Partnerships team. Leora has a background in community and youth development, a long background, and has worked with NGOs, local government, and most recently Auckland Council. So thank you for taking the time today, Leora. Megan Courtney, the co-director at Inspiring Communities. I know you've got a large audience in the room today. Inspiring Communities has been championing the movement for place-based change around Aotearoa with a network of some 4,000 plus people with community initiatives, public sector groups and individuals. Megan herself has been championing community change for the last 25 years, and we are very grateful for you taking the time to be with us today as well. And last but certainly not least, Rebecca from WELLfed. Now, Rebecca is the co-founder of WELLfed, which is a program out in Porirua East that uses cooking education as a vehicle to facilitate social change. I also want to give a shout out to Rebecca, who won New Zealander of the Year for Community in 2018. So we are that you've taken some time out of important frontline work to join us and our members in this webinar, so thank you. Right, I guess we have some 100 PSA members and attendees here with us now, so it's a good time to ask Janie to take us through some of the key points in your chapter. I know that we've linked that to the PSA website. If folks haven't read it yet, it should also be in the chat, so either listen and read along, but yeah, we'd love to hear the points about the messages you wanted to land.
Sure, thank you, Sarah, and thank you to the PSA for the series. It's really awesome. I just want to caveat first that I'm not an expert in anything. I just have a bunch of experiences, and I like writing and talking. So, you know, I write kids' plays about elephants, and I hang out in Fijian villages. So, what do I know? About a month before lockdown, I wrote a draft, and you know, I think I was trying to just be clever and write what people wanted to hear, but I think COVID had such a lockdown had such a personal effect on me. I asked Sarah if I could include that in my next draft, and thank you for being open to that. It's shifted quite a lot for me, so thank you. So I guess my story starts back in 2017 when I was in Fiji at a CAP conference, which is part of COP23. So this was where voices of local civil society in the Pacific were getting a platform about their own responses and needs in the climate change agenda. And I met Frank Bainimarama, who's the Prime Minister of Fiji. And I thought, first of all, I thought he was a bit shorter than I imagined and kind of gentler. And then we went out into Eastern Fiji and hung out in some villages, and I was talking to a Tūrangani Korowa head man in a village who said that even though Frank Bainimarama is the Prime Minister of Fiji, actually his first responsibility is either as a fisherman or a gardener in his village. And that was a major motivator for him, and was his first responsibility. And it struck me that kind of inherent responsibility, which is a collective one, not an individual one. It's in a Fiji setting, my experiences were that it keeps villages functioning and it keeps them sustainable. Obviously, we can't have a romantic view of that. There are lots of tensions that come across the roots of that, like the contemporary form of colonisation, capitalism, urbanisation, all the isations. But actually this kind of social infrastructure, it's fundamental to a Fijian way of life. And there are many thinkers and doers, incredible people in the Pacific who say that actually that holds the key for the Pacific to protest and protect their best features. So I came home and I thought, oh yeah, I'll get a job in international development. I really want to look at New Zealand's support of the Pacific. I couldn't really find the role that I wanted. The localisation agenda was really foremost at the time, and I thought, oh, that's really cool. But I guess I was also looking at kind of an exit strategy for international NGOs working in the Pacific, and I wasn't there. That wasn't always popular. I just wanted us to be good neighbours, and that looks very different from a Pacific perspective. So yeah, I thought, well, what does it mean for me? Why am I so obsessed with the Pacific? Why don't I plant my feet firmly in the ground here? And I did a few engagement roles in a couple of government agencies, and I was always trying to screw with the hierarchy, like, in those documents you've got government, iwi is somewhere, then there's this kind of a muddle of community and other versions of civil society at the bottom, and I tried to shove it on its head, and then I tried a flat hierarchy. And anyway, I started looking for a different kind of job, and I discovered B Collective. I'm a community development manager there, and what I love about them, mostly, lots of things, but mostly is they give community a capital letter, and it's at the heart of everything we do. And we go into communities and we promote collaboration. We consider it an ecosystem. So whether it's mana whenua, education, government, business, community groups, actually, we're all kind of about the same thing. So yeah, we build that kind of social infrastructure that, kind of ironically, it thrives in pandemics. We had a really interesting time, but enough of that. I think the word volunteering can be a bit tricky. There's the traditional model, the kind of white middle class do-gooder, and we need those cohorts, we need those people, but actually it's diversified a lot around mahi aroha. I was talking to an awesome man in the Pacific community here around service and what that means, especially to young people, and how can that be utilised as pathways to employment and things. And then I read an awesome thing by Inspiring Communities, and they talk about this once in a generation opportunity where the local community is the critical setting. It's not just a setting, it's actually the critical setting that determines a lot of things. And there's a lot of support, and Leora will talk about the DIA community-led stuff, which is amazing, and there's lots of grassroots stuff that fly under the radar, and sometimes that's good, not relying on funding and reports and things. Shot Bro, just Google Rob Mukaraka and Shot Bro and see what he's doing in the mental wellbeing space. It's just unbelievable, getting I won't rave on. But I think communities, they collaborate naturally, and they know what their local challenges are, and they know what their needs are. And of course they need support, and we know that the sector's underfunded. There's been a lot of work down there. So there appears to be an appetite for more supportive community-led development at the moment, and all the reports that are coming out around the COVID psychosocial mental wellbeing recovery plan, the Rebuilding Together budget, they do talk about supporting community-led recovery and development, and then, I think we can add re-envisioning onto that as well. And I just hope the resources don't get caught at that strategy level. I hope there's an amazing combination of it being led by community as well. I think my question is also who isn't at the table when we're having these conversations. But mainly for me, in lockdown and trying to manage this massive thing that was happening outside my bubble with my personal experiences, I think COVID lockdown could be told beautifully by the people that we met when we were out in our hood, that we stayed a while longer and chatted with. And I met this gorgeous man who works at the local car park here in the mega centre, and he'd been there for 35 years, and it was his exercise and everything, and he lost his job, and he was told a little, that he wouldn't be coming back. And I have him kind of on my shoulder. But I also met this amazing woman up on the cliffs on the beach, and she describes her own childhood as pretty challenging. She was a solo mum with 3 kids, and she wanted something better for her kids, so she went into education. She retrained herself trained herself and worked in health for a while, but she got burnt out. And I remember it was one really windy day, and the wind was like whipping around, and we were like this far from the edge, and I thought, oh my darling, this wind could either like just throw you off, or it could make you fly. And what do you need? What do you need right now, and are you going to get it? And yeah, she's just got so much knowledge and gifts about her own people. And so that got me thinking around if we spend more time in our own communities and we really take the time to meet people and engage with people like her and him, does that mean that we'll do better for them? And that's something I'm not willing to give up. I know we were asked at the beginning of lockdown, what are we willing to give up in order to keep New Zealand safe? Well, I would love to just hold on to that. How can I hold on to that? So I suppose it's also about the future of work. Like my amazing job, I get to go out and do some community work from my own connections and things that I'm interested in. It's part of our future of work. It's part of it's just really accepted. So I'm not talking about corporate social responsibility or corporate volunteering, but actually my first responsibility has kind of changed. And I think we're all kind of looking to community to transform New Zealand at the moment. And for me, that definitely starts with the personal and what we bring to our roles, and how does that inform the work we do? What kind of bags of cassava we got over our shoulder, and who have we connected with, and how did that change?
That connects really nicely, Janie, to the purpose for the entire series here.
Good, because I'm at the end.
The future of public and community services is what these discussions are all centred around. So unless you've got other points you'd like to add, that's probably a nice segue.
No, I was just going to add, how does that affect then the delivery of public services? And that's it. So perfectly done, Sarah.
Well, look, we have a roundtable of very informed and interesting women who have different perspectives on all of that. So thank you for summarising what I found to be a very affecting chapter. It was a really emotional read. It hit home for me and my COVID experience, and same to the people that I've spoken with at the PSA. So Rebecca, we know that WELLfed, you're on the front line. WELLfed is a busy and successful example of community-led development. When Janie's talking about this tension between and tension might be too negative a word, but the push and pull between the professional and the personal in everything that we do, in the roles that we play and the commitments that we have. How did that point land for you?
And I think that the head and the heart together is where we're at, isn't it? We're doing things to the best of our ability or the most efficient way, but we never forget that there's eyes and teeth and a family and love behind anybody that we are all serving, whether it's in the public sector or in the social sector, community sector. Yeah, it really resonated for me. Thank you, Janie, for putting that all down on paper. I have reflected on the Rahui lockdown experience being, while a collective experience, actually quite a unique individual experience, because each of us had extremely different scenarios, whether we had children underfoot, or whether we had work security, job security, or whether we had food in the cupboard, or whether we had access to the Wi-Fi and the devices that we needed. So on a personal level, the lockdown period was challenging with small children, but on a professional level, with the work that we do at WELLfed, it was also challenging but amazing, because WELLfed's all about nourishing communities, both with food and connections. And so WELLfed is effectively cooking classes, but much, much more. So our learners, who are adult students, part of the program for a long time, getting confidence, getting skills, being equipped with what they need to cook well at home for their own family, which comes with all that mana and dignity of not a handout, but literally a hand up to be able to do it for yourself. And so during lockdown, when I woke every morning in my warm, dry house, my thoughts went straight to others who perhaps weren't in that same place of privilege. They may not have been in a home of safety. They may not have had food in the pantry or the cupboard. So we at WELLfed switched completely around, and as you've mentioned, we started a completely volunteer run. My friend Kim Murray and I founded 4 years ago, just working with the community in response to what they were asking, and we both volunteered within Porirua East for over 5 years. So we thought we had a rough idea of some of the community needs, but of course we had no idea at all once we got going and really got to that deeper level and built trust and connection, and that opened up really honest conversations, and that meant we could adapt. So now WELLfed is trained up graduates, so our learners are now becoming leaders. They're teaching others within their own community. And it's all about the ripple effect. Teach an adult within a household, they can teach others, their children, others within the household, likewise into the wider community. So yeah, a very collective yet unique experience. And I think, yeah, so I mean, WELLfed was part of the emergency civil defence response with the welfare piece. We were, you know, granted emergency, critical service. So we just carried on, switched our delivery into a different format with videos and packs that were delivered off to homes, and kept running, but in a different way. So we felt that the collective mahi, that the whole organisation, and knowing we were supported by the wider governmental clarity around communication and team of 5 million, we felt everyone felt very blessed and supported by that, actually. And you know, we've got friends and connections overseas that are very, very jealous of the scenario that we have here, and that's thanks to the work of so many. There's one more thing I'd just quickly like to add about a little, just reflecting on the power of the Mahi Aroha that Janie's already mentioned, and that this week is National Volunteer Week. So where would we be without our beautiful volunteers in this country doing so much good and so much work, and being, that is community, isn't it? Looking out for our neighbours. Physically during the Rahui lockdown, lots of people, it was the first time they met their neighbours, which is, you know, an amazing thing for us all to make sure we carry on with, and we go back to a new normal. We don't just revert back to the life as it was before.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. Megan, you've also been out and talking to community in the aftermath of the COVID lockdown. Your work with Inspiring Communities gives you a nationwide perspective, which I think in this discussion is really useful. Are you are you able to talk to us a bit about how you think COVID led to a pivot back to or towards place-based communities?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess starting off, there's many ways to define community, and they're all right. Communities of interest, communities are online, communities of ethnicity, etc. But the notion of communities of place, I think, kind of has had more of a profile through COVID, because we actually had time, as you mentioned in Jamie's article, to actually, be in place. And I think it's, in the last kind of month, we've spoken to, had the privilege really of interviewing about 75 people across the motu, about their kind of locally led experience and what we think it moves for what it means for moving things forward to enable the right conditions for communities to kind of be much more resilient. And what kind of came out of that overall was, we remembered again what's really important to us, and it's whānau, and it's this notion of community, which a lot of us had forgotten. And I think, through He Waka Eke Noa, that kind of concept of, we're all in this together, but actually everyone matters, and we all did stuff to ensure that everyone mattered, whether that was picking up groceries for people that couldn't, or changing the configuration in the teddies in your front door so that they were doing something different when local kids came to watch. That was expressed in a whole different way. And there were the formal and informal systems that helped communities survive as well, and I think it's, the little things that we all did, but also when push comes to shove, when we talk about vulnerable people and people in need, community organisations and iwi groups and, those that are closest to local people have that inside knowledge that enabled that kind of matching process to happen, or the natural delivery. And just want to pick up lots of our smaller rural communities that, stuff just happened. No one told anyone to do it. There's a kind of a natural kind of caring that just kicked in. And I think that kind of made us stand back and realise we've got something pretty special here. And it does actually matter. I'm not saying it was a shared experience for all, but I think it's reminded us about the importance of place. And why does that matter? And I want to pick up the thing with volunteering. And I also have a problem with that word volunteerism, not with the action of it, but there's something else there. And we like to talk about active citizenship, right? And it's not about voting. It's not just about having the piece of paper in your passport. It's about the kind of roles and responsibilities and contributions we can all make as citizens in a whole different number of ways, through participating in consultation processes, through rocking up and, being there at whānau night at your kids' school, through to getting involved in a community group and supporting stuff. So in a whole range of areas. So this notion that actually we're all part of community and we're all part of the system as well, hey?
Mm-hmm.
But I want to make the point that in order to be able to contribute, first you have to belong. And I think COVID has enabled us to get a sense of belonging and identity with this thing called place that a lot of people hadn't actually had the opportunity to experience before. We now have uncovered the gems, the parks down the road, or the trees on the hill, or the sparkling of the waters, or the connections between our cul-de-sacs that we didn't know existed until we had time to look. So I think that sense of place has heightened, and I'm optimistic what it may mean to actually all us kind of activating this notion of citizenship and contribution. Because at the end of the day, when we talk about a community-led approach and place, it's not any one of us, whether it be the council or a community organisation or iwi, on our own we're nothing, but together and weaving our contributions, communities can be so much stronger. And we've seen that through COVID. And I think that's the exciting space that all of a sudden can become much more possible. And I think as public servants, straddling that kind of we're a resident and a citizen as well as a public servant, and how we can bring our whole selves to work and keep doing amazing things in both kind of capacities is part of that change as well.
Awesome, thank you, Megan. I'll flip, I think, naturally to Leora now, but yeah, do feel free to send your questions through, everyone, because we're going to get to your questions shortly. Leora, all of that speaks a bit to how you can support community from within government. That's something I feel, deeply, as having been a public servant and in and around Wellington for a long time. How can you do this? How can you do this effectively from within government? I'll just note that you are on mute before you start speaking. I don't want to miss a word.
Thanks, Sarah. And yeah, great question. And kia ora to friends and colleagues of mine from Auckland Council and DIA that I can see have joined. And thanks very much, Janie, for inviting me to be part of this panel. Yeah, I think what drew a lot of us to being a public servant is public service. I think very much, you know, seeing what can we do to contribute to community in the wider sense. I feel really privileged to be in the role I'm in at Department of Internal Affairs, because we are lucky to have a really unique program that Janie mentions in the chapter, actually, called the Community-Led Development Program, which I think is a really different way of government trying to connect with community. So often, you know, when I've been working in the community sector or even in council, you'd see government come in and impose a program maybe that they'd taken from overseas and say, you know, we want community, you to do this. Whereas this is our attempt to try and turn that round and work with communities and say, you tell us what you need, you identify your needs, and we'll see if we can resource it and other ways of supporting it and brokering connections. So I feel really privileged to be part of a program that's doing that. You know, it's not without its challenges. Janie spoke before about trying to flatten hierarchies and so forth. And when we're working with communities, we are still coming in as government. So how can we be a really good partner and try and find ways to really ensure that power is somehow balanced? It's not easy, and it's a tension we're constantly grappling with, but it's certainly something we're really aware of. And how can we continue to push barriers against ourselves? Whereas, you know, in government, obviously we have to be really careful of how we manage government assets and taxpayer dollars. But how do we also allow for that innovation and be open to hearing new ideas and supporting that? And I guess for me, I mean, lots of things stood out from me from Janie's article, but one of the things that really stood out was the innovation and the community's ability to pivot and respond to needs as they emerged. And Rebecca certainly spoke to that in the work that she does. And it's been great to see government is also trying to do that, looking for ways to respond and finding emerging need. You know, like any big organisation, we are a big ocean liner to turn around and do things differently. You know, people are looking for that, and we can learn a lot about that from community, I think.
Thank you.
One more point I just pick up on is the whole question of volunteering. And it's been amazing, and yes, it's all sorts of things for all sorts of people, and something that's really been highlighted to me through the community-led development program and through COVID is, I guess, for me, I think the concept of volunteering is almost quite a Western construct. I suppose, you know, in the Pacific and within Māori communities.
Yeah.
You just do what you do because you're part of the community, and probably we saw that more and more while we were in lockdown as we remembered we were just part of the community. So if you knew a neighbour couldn't go out and get their shopping, you could ring up and do that for them. Or if you knew you had extra produce in your veggie garden, you could leave it at your gate and others could do it. So I think we wouldn't necessarily term that volunteering, it was just being part of the community.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Leora, that was really great in that thing about how does government engage with community differently. I still think there's some really old models of that continuum of participation and consultation. And I think we should just like throw away consultation. It's just such a Western Pākehā word. And one other thing I've noticed just from my experience in local government and central government is that we still consider iwi and mana whenua as stakeholders. They're not stakeholders, they're partners, and we all know that, but there's so many strategies that still see them as a stakeholder, they're partners, which I think sounds really simple, but I don't know if we would do it beautifully.
Well, I think a few questions. Oh, go on, Megan.
I think that consultation word is kind of fraught. My kids talk about this 2 C words they're not allowed to use at home: charity and consultation.
Oh, lovely. That's so cool.
Charity for me is like, you know, that's a word as well that's got to go, because that's a one-way relationship, right? traditional sense of the word. If we're talking about, you know, communities where we've all got a role and we can all contribute, we're talking about reciprocity, right? So, you know, the language that we use frames the relationships that we enter into. So,
yeah. Rebecca and I, we've got a a mission to write a development dictionary that talks about these words and just obliterates the perception and the meaning. Let's do it, gal.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, let's take some questions. We've got a couple through here, so please keep sending them through. And what we might do as well is, if you would like, our audience, if you would like to share a reflection that you've had in your community during the lockdown, or a response that you want to share today, just use the raise your hand function, and we'll see if we can have you join us visually here on screen to talk to some of your experiences. But first, Adrian has a question here. Adrian is interested in asking all of the panelists what they think about the lockdown and the revelation that many households and businesses had no spare cash to call on. Not, you know, even a week of no income indicated that they were out, and they immediately had to draw down from food banks. So I suppose, speaking to a question of hardship there, Rebecca, I don't know if you want to kick off an answer to Adrian.
Sure. I'd just, my one point would be that perhaps wouldn't be a revelation for a number of people on the front line. That's a known fact, that's just the lives that some people are living. And so, yes, it's kind of heartbreaking when we start to see and really take the time to journey alongside people and really get to understand what lives are like. And clearly the best statistics in the world can paint a picture, but until we understand the complexity behind those stories, I've got a view that a lot of simple problems are kind of solved or solvable. We all know about the wicked problems with multi-threading. It feels like some of these issues that the Rahui has uncovered, and let's be honest, it's not even changed it yet, it's just uncovered the inequity that exists now. We're not even into an economic, you know, outflow in a longer time scale, but those really difficult, gnarly problems that are left are not silo based. They cut across many different aspects of lives. So yes, the fact that there's no spare cash for even a week is heartbreaking, but actually not a surprise. Yeah.
I also heard other stories of people commenting that actually for some of the whānau, life kind of continued on, right? They've never had a lot, so they just continued on living. Yet for others, all of a sudden, when the access to supermarkets and takeaways and ways that they normally ate and lived their lives stopped, they didn't know what to do. So also, which validates some of the work that Rebecca and others are doing about, you know, food resilience. You know, how do we know how to cook? What can we grow in our own backyards? What can our kids teach us? What are the skills they're actually picking up at school? How does that translate into our school lunch boxes? And I get that, I certainly get the money thing, but I still think that there's something else out there in terms of, you know, resilience that we need to be thinking about. It's not just about the money. Communities have strategies for all sorts of things that we, you know, haven't uncovered how they do what they do to actually enable some more of that stuff to be happen and some lights to be shone on some of the good stuff as well. Because the resilience that's there is massive in lots of cases too. Not negating the struggles, but you know, there's an awful lot that is amazing that does happen that we just don't see because we don't look and we don't actually take the time to listen.
Another question coming through here. Talking about your point, Janie, to move away from consultation to collaboration, instead of stakeholder engagement and plans like this, which you do reflect on in your chapter in your own experience, what should we use instead?
Well, I think it's different in different settings, but one thing I discovered when I went back to university at the age of 40-something was action research. So there's lots of versions of this participatory action research where it's way beyond co-design. It's so instead of actually going out with an idea, you start with the people who want to design their own and identify their own needs if they want to. They might tell you to bugger off. And that's totally okay. But I think it's, again, it's who's not at the table when you're considering, and that's really hard in a political environment. It's really tricky. You've got so many agendas, and it depends where you are on that cycle, which we all know. But yeah, oh my God, is that a wafty answer?
Oh, thank you. Look, we've got lots of questions.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, actually, taking that concept that there's, so often we go to co-design as the go-to place for designing solutions. And you're talking, Janie, about starting even beyond that, co-designs already.
Yeah.
You've already got some kind of pre-formed concept, whereas if you go straight to participation and have it bubble up from community, that's quite different.
And communities do that anyway. Like Shopbro, I know he's a little hesitant about getting financial and other support because his mahi is so authentic to the communities that he works with. Yeah, I think it's different, but I think it is. I love your thing, Megan, the C word, 2 C words.
We have a question from Kate Lewis, who's digging into this a bit more. She's asking, from a local government perspective, how can we ensure that what the community, and I guess the point here is the community as a definition and a phrase, how can we ensure that what the community is identifying as a need is representative of the wider community? Does it need to be?
I guess there's an and in there, just to kind of pick up a response to that one. Yeah, community in inverted commas, is that the community that comes through annual plan and long-term planning processes and knows how to drive a submission? Is that a comment that we've heard as we were sitting and actually chatting to mums in a local park as they watch their kids play? You know, the who actually is important, and understanding, you know, no one can speak for anyone else. Yeah. Knowing that actually we've kind of heard that same comment in 6 or 7 or 8 different places, and it may pick up a wider theme. I'd also kind of pick up, we need to be asking about needs, but also about aspirations. Because I think, you know, needs puts us into that, again, that deprivation deficit lens, and doesn't enable us to think about what else might be possible. And I think if we think about the kind of reimagining what might be possible post-COVID, that kind of possibility thinking and pushing us all to think about what else, what different. And the follow-up question, not just what do you want to see, but what's my contribution to that? How can you help, and how can I support you do that? Because I think part of the active citizenship is actually activating and awakening that we all have a role to play in this stuff. So whether that be local mums, you know, they might actually, I don't know, plant some flowers in the park. I don't know. There's all sorts of things, little things that we can do that grows our sense of belonging and contribution. But unless we ask, how can you do what you do? We never know.
And I think, I met this lovely Fijian woman, and she kind of just laughed at me, and she said, dude, she didn't use that word, you're coming in, we know what we want. We've existed outside what you consider the centre of things. It's the Indigenous story all around the world. We've already, you might think we're on the margins and we're not part of community needs, but we do it anyway. So if we get ourselves out of the picture and just ask, or provide opportunities for people to tell us, there's some cool stuff in Purirua. Rebecca, you would know where the community, and maybe it was you, Megan, that was talking about it, the community invited government to come in to say what they needed, not the other way around.
I think that's true, not to be afraid to ask the question, to get alongside people, to meet people where they are, knowing that one size fits no one. It's either too big or too small. So there's this really high kind of disruptive environment that we are living in anyway, but add in the COVID scenario, and it becomes even more so. So it's a real challenge for us as humans to have the stability that we all like, but knowing that disruption actually is possibly where we need to be working with our communities alongside.
I'm conscious that we are coming towards the end of our session, so I wonder if anybody in our audience would like to, we've noted down all the questions that you've sent through to the Q&A, and if we haven't got to yours, we will come back to you, but if anyone would like to raise their hand now to share perhaps a community experience that they had during COVID, our wonderful techies behind the scene will beam you in, and hopefully you can join us. If not, we will go back to the Q&A. But does anybody out there want to reflect on one of their walks in their community, who they bumped into, anything that they learned, anything that they found themselves doing during lockdown that work from home perhaps allowed, or being off work allowed?
Yeah,
I understand if that might seem a bit daunting. Oh, Tracy O'Brien. Let's see, Tracy.
I think I needed to unmute.
Oh, you did. Hi, Tracy. If you turn your video on, we'll be able to see you.
Oh my goodness, that sounds a bit technical. How do I do that?
It should be just the bottom left, but you're welcome to just speak to us if you don't want to beam yourself through. But just the bottom left, you should have a red line through your video that you can unclick.
I can't see that, so I'm just going to talk.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for raising your hand.
I suppose for me, there was a raft of issues. One was I went from a stage of initially beating myself up for being based at home and trying to probably match my normal output in regards to workflow, but also finding myself absolutely glued to the TV to watch the daily news, and really just mental health wise actually needing that time to come to terms with what was happening, not only in my household, but the difficulty getting a hold of some of my community clients. And then interspersed with that sort of situation was the use of technology was just made available really, really quickly, and being able to connect with colleagues and get collegial support, professional support via technology was really awesome. One of the most moving experiences I had was actually Anzac morning. We stood at the end of our driveway, and I was quite moved by the number of people that came out, at dawn and was standing there with good old Radio New Zealand playing, and just felt one alone, but really proud also that collectively we were in our line of the street, sort of looking at each other from our own little bubbles, sharing that moment of, really being proud and reflecting about the history and sacrifice actually that's happened. I've seen people in the community, because I only moved there about a year ago, where we're living. I didn't know many of my neighbours at all, or the wider surrounding community. But just having an opportunity to talk to people and get to know them, offering support to pick things up. And I get what you're saying. I think we become so frantically busy in our day-to-day lives that we just need to learn to slow down and appreciate our place in our community and build that connection with people.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Is there anybody else that wants? We've got a couple of minutes before we wrap up. If anyone else would like to raise their hand and share something, we welcome that. Okay. Chris Lane.
Oh, I'll take the
Welcome.
video. Oh, kia ora. I can't find the video button either at this stage, but I'm quite happy to talk. I just wanted to mention, as a public servant supporting Randwick Park, one of the communities had an idea while we were in level 3, so the 48 hours prior to level 4 lockdown, who was able to contact us and come up with an idea of getting chalk and chocolates and prizes and doing some, getting a printer, etc. within that 48 hours to be able to connect the community. And they started off with building on an existing strength of being of one of the street Facebook areas that they had, and expanding that over to 8 during the lockdown period. They were able to then connect with the local marae, Manurewa marae, and be able to provide hygiene packs and everything. There's the 2 community-led development workers, Jess and Marie, spoke on the unconference this morning more in depth about that. So I'll just leave it there.
Thank you so much, Rosanne. All right, well, e te whānau manaaki hi mihi mai o ha tēnei kia koutou kua ora katoa te whānau nei iha koutou nā reira tēnā tātua. Thank you all for giving us your time today, our panelists and everyone who's joined us in the audience. You can read Janie's chapter on the PSA website. Please do look out for our next webinar session, which will be coming up in a couple of weeks. And yeah, thank you again. The conversations that we've had today, I think, speak to the connection across all of the work that we are doing, and long may it continue. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Haere rā.
Thanks.
Bye.
Happy thanks.